When we spoke with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, we wanted to focus our conversation on the infrastructure bill and other DOT priorities. But first, we had to ask, what can be done to make the diesel fuel powering the nation's pickups, tractors, and semis a more affordable fuel source?
Well, we're continuing to look at all measures that are available to the administration. Obviously, a lot of this is based on global oil market dynamics, but as you've seen, there's been a coordinated response really across the gas and diesel market, everything from ethanol flexibility to the strategic petroleum reserve. And you're going to continue to see measures as much as possible in order to try to blunt the effect of this really global impact on the diesel and gas market.
So I want to pivot to the electric vehicles that so many people talk about. I've heard you say that you think rural America really stands to benefit from that technology. But if we're honest with ourselves, the charging infrastructure is not the same in rural America as it is in urban America. I know there's money in the infrastructure bill to help make that happen, but what do you think folks can expect in terms of a timeline of when that charging infrastructure will be there?
Well, that's right. Look, on one hand, rural America has a built-in advantage when it comes to charging infrastructure because rural Americans are more likely to live in single-family homes, which means you have at least basic charging infrastructure in the form of the plug in your wall. At the same time, when you're covering those long distances, or if you don't have your own garage or that kind of access, you're really going to count on the network that we're investing to build right now. We have just put forward, as of today, the requirements for the $5 billion in investments that we're making, working with every state in the country to create that national network. And we expect that work to begin very quickly. The state's plans are due into us by the 1st of August. And from there, I don't think it'll be much longer before you see additional chargers going into the ground, building up those in-between spaces across our highway network where we know we need to create more options so that it's as easy to assume that you're going to find a charge as it is to know there will be a gas station when you go on a road trip.
We'll be right back to discuss more of the agricultural supply chain with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg right after this.
It's not as simple just to wake up one day and go, I want to be a conservation farmer. You're changing how your farming practice is done. You're changing your operation.
Farm Credit supported John and Kelly Watley as they shifted to more sustainable farming, improving the environment where they farm and live. Learn more at farmcredit.com/climate.
Welcome back. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg was one of several administration officials who toured rural America to discuss the infrastructure bill earlier this year. When we spoke with him, we asked what he learned about the unique infrastructure needs of rural America during that tour.
You know, I try to spend a lot of time in rural America because these infrastructure needs are unique, and you see how an investment can go a long, long way. Sometimes investments that don't look like as big numbers by the standards of Washington or Congress, but they really add up one community at a time. I'm thinking about $1.5 million that we invested to improve a small port in Tell City, Indiana on the Ohio River. It's going to make a huge difference for their ability to support a foundry that's responsible for about 1,000 jobs. I was just in eastern Michigan as we were announcing the rail improvements that we're making. And again, the dollar amounts maybe aren't the same that you would expect going into some of the biggest cities, although when you add it all up, it's a huge proportion of our programs. As a matter of fact, whether you look at our infra grant program, which is focused on freight, or the grants that we're rolling out right now when it comes to rail, we've nearly doubled the congressional requirement for rural investments because so many of the applications, so many of the best ideas, and frankly, so many of the biggest needs are coming from our rural communities, whether we're talking about bridges that need to be fixed up so you don't have a load limit and have to take a long detour, or whether we're talking about those rail improvements that are going to help ag goods get to where they need to be and can make a big difference for passengers too.
Quickly, Mr. Secretary, here, I just want to quick pivot to another subject because I know there's been concerns about potential dock worker issues this summer with the expiration of their contract, possible strike there. There's always worries about the health of the nation's rail service given the situations that we've seen, issues that we've seen previously. Farmers and ranchers are going to be harvesting a lot of grain later this fall. Do you think they will have the most reliable supply chain system that they can at that time? Will some of these issues that we're seeing potentially be fixed and be avoidable at that point in time?
So we're always monitoring anything that could impact supply chains, whether we're talking about imports or exports. We've been in touch with the different parties with regard to the West Coast labor negotiations, for example, and so far everything is proceeding smoothly on that front. Also keeping an eye on the rail side where there are labor conversations going on, and being ready for just the seasonal pressures that we know are going to come with holiday shopping and a lot of Chinese cities or ports coming back online or coming in and out. The truth is, from day to day, week to week, there seems to be always a new factor or surprise that could play a role in our supply chains. It's exactly why we're working both the immediate term and the longer term investments to make sure our supply chains are resilient no matter what the curveball, no matter what the shock. And that's what these big infrastructure investments are about in rural and coastal and urban America alike.
Mr. Secretary, thanks for joining us.
Good being with you. Thanks for having me.